In the evening, Peter and Brian were sitting in the living room. The TV was on, but neither of them was really watching it. The house felt quiet. Too quiet, the kind of calm that feels unnatural. Brian lay on the carpet. Peter flipped through channels, yawning. The door to the room slowly opened and Stewie walked in. He looked normal, almost too normal. He smiled, spoke cheerfully, joked around, but something about his voice felt wrong. He asked strange questions. He asked if they loved their family. He asked what would happen if someone simply disappeared. Peter brushed it off. Brian became uneasy. As time passed, strange things started happening in the house. The lights flickered for no reason. Footsteps could be heard where no one was walking. Sometimes it felt like the rooms were getting larger, the ceilings higher. Stewie stayed close the whole time, happy and calm, like he was watching an experiment. That night, Peter had heavy dreams. He woke up several times, hearing someone moving through the house, but when he stepped into the hallway, there was no one there. Only soft laughter echoing from somewhere far away. In the morning, Peter woke up to complete silence. Lois was gone. Chris was gone. Brian was gone. No sounds, no signs. The kitchen was clean. The bedrooms were tidy, as if no one had lived there at all. In the living room, Stewie was sitting. He was playing, laughing, humming to himself. When Peter asked where everyone was, Stewie looked at him with honest surprise and said they were just busy. He told Peter not to worry, but Peter already knew. The house wasn't empty by accident. He went down into the basement. The light didn't turn on right away. The bulb buzzed, and in the dim glow, Peter saw them. The whole family was there, sitting still, silent. Their eyes were empty. They were breathing, but they didn't react, like they were present, but not fully. Peter took a step forward. Then he heard a voice behind him. Stewie was standing at the top of the stairs. He wasn't smiling anymore. His voice was calm and cold. He said Peter shouldn't have come down here. He said now everything was ruined. Some things were meant to stay hidden. The basement door slowly closed. The light went out. The screen faded to black. That night, Peter woke up feeling thirsty. The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that feels heavy when everyone is asleep. He put on his slippers and walked into the kitchen. The cold light from the refrigerator spilled across the floor, the table, the walls. And that's when he saw Brian. Brian was standing in the kitchen, but he didn't look right. He was too big. His back nearly touched the upper cabinets. His fur was messy, wild, like he had been running for hours. His eyes reflected the light in a dull, strange way. He didn't move. He just stared. Peter froze. He wanted to joke, to say something stupid, but no words came out. Brian slowly tilted his head, and Peter realized it was still Brian. And at the same time, it wasn't. The next morning, everything seemed normal. Brian was his usual size again, sitting at the table, drinking coffee like nothing had happened. Peter told himself it was a dream. But Meg didn't come down for breakfast. At first, they thought she left early. Then they thought she was late. By evening, it was clear Meg was gone. Her room was empty, the bed neatly made, the window closed. That night, Peter woke up again. This time, he heard a soft sound from the hallway, like someone breathing too slowly, too deeply. He stayed in bed and didn't move. The next day, Chris disappeared. Then Lois. Each time, there were no signs, no noise, no explanation. The house grew quieter. Rooms stayed full of things, but the people were gone, as if they had simply stepped away and never returned. During the day, Brian acted calm, almost too calm. He watched TV, ate, sometimes smiled. But at night, the house changed. The floorboards creaked. The walls felt closer. On the final night, Peter came home late. The lights wouldn't turn on. The living room smelled like fur and cold air. He took a step forward and saw a massive Brian, filling almost the entire room. His eyes were locked on Peter. Peter understood then that he was alone. It started as a normal walk. Late in the evening, Peter left the house saying he just needed some air. The night felt wrong, too quiet. No cars, no voices. Even the streetlights seemed dimmer than usual, as if they were trying to save power. He turned a corner, and the town changed. The houses were still there, but they looked off. Windows were dark. The road was wet. The air felt heavy and cold. Dust floated slowly, even though there was no wind. Every step Peter took sounded too loud. He realized he couldn't find his way back. Quahog was empty. Stores were open, but inside there was nothing. Phones didn't work. Clocks in the windows were frozen. Time wasn't moving here. Peter started to panic. He shouted for Lois. He laughed, trying to make it feel less scary. His voice came back to him with a delay, like someone was repeating it a second later. Then he saw himself. Another Peter stood in the middle of the street. He looked cleaner, calmer. His face showed no emotion. He watched closely, like he was studying him. The other Peter spoke quietly. He knew everything. The house, the kids' names, what Peter had done yesterday. He said this was the real Quahog. The normal one was just a loud, messy copy. Here, nothing changed, nothing left. Peter tried to run, but the streets closed in on him. Houses repeated. Every road led to another broken version of a familiar place. At some point, Peter noticed the other one was no longer following him. He was waiting. In the morning, Lois saw Peter in the kitchen. He sat straight, calm, drinking coffee, listening. He didn't joke. He didn't shout. He didn't laugh. The house became quieter. Sometimes Peter stopped and stared at the wall, like he was listening to something no one else could hear. Sometimes he checked the doors and windows, not to escape, but to make sure nothing could come in. Somewhere in the cold, empty version of the town, the other Peter was still walking the streets, laughing too loudly, calling for his family, but he was never coming home. The episode starts quietly. Late at night, Peter comes downstairs to get a glass of water. As he walks into the kitchen, he notices Brian sitting by the window in complete darkness, completely still, like a statue. Peter flips the light on, and Brian slowly turns his head with a slight delay, as if his muscles aren't responding right. Peter asks if everything's okay. Brian smiles a little too widely and says, "Yeah, just listening." "Listening to who?" Peter asks. "The house," Brian replies. The next morning, Brian acts normal, but something is undeniably off. He doesn't answer when spoken to, as if he's busy listening to something inside his own mind. He barely blinks, and when he does, it's slow and unnatural. The fur on his neck is permanently raised, as if sensing something invisible. Lois notices he's been walking around the house at night. Heavy, long footsteps that sound like a much bigger animal. One day, Meg tries to pet Brian, but he jerks back suddenly, and his pupils expand instantly, covering almost the entire eye. For a split second, he looks like he doesn't recognize her at all. Then, in a calm monotone, he says, "I shouldn't. I'm changing." That evening, Brian stops eating regular dog food. Instead, he sits by the refrigerator, listening to the hum of the motor like it's whispering something important. Peter jokes about it, but later that night he hears Brian scratching loudly across the floor, not with paws, but with something long and sharp, like claws. By the next morning, Brian is bigger, much bigger. His chest looks broader, his footsteps heavier. He moves like he's adjusting to new muscles he didn't have before. His eyes shine with a faint glassy glow. Lois suddenly realizes Stewie is missing. His room is empty. No crib, no toys, no trace of him. Only one broken toy on the floor. Panicking, Peter runs to Brian. "Did you see Stewie? Where is he?" Brian lifts his head slowly, and a strange sound escapes him. Half laugh, half growl. "He took care of things," Brian says calmly. Peter tears through the house searching for Stewie, calling his name. Brian follows him everywhere, towering over him now, his head nearly brushing the door frames. His movements are slow, controlled, confident, like he already knows Peter won't find anything. At night, Peter checks the basement, hoping for any clue. But it's dark and too quiet. When he turns around, the door shuts by itself. Brian stands at the top of the stairs, massive, almost human tall. His shadow fills the entire doorway. His fur bristles like a mane, and his eyes glow faintly as he speaks. "The house told me," he says gently, "told me what I'm supposed to become." Peter steps back in terror as Brian begins descending the stairs one step at a time. Each one shakes the basement slightly. "You're not Brian," Peter whispers. Brian smiles, his mouth stretching too far. "I'm better." The light flickers, the sound cuts out. The screen goes black. A final post-credits shot appears. It's nighttime in the Griffin living room. An enormous creature, Brian's final form, sits calmly on the couch, breathing slowly. His silhouette is monstrous, but he sits like a person. The house is silent. There is no Peter, no Lois, no Stewie, only Brian, and the sound of his slow, heavy breathing. The episode begins with Stewie hearing a strange sound in his room. A faint, static crackling coming from his old baby monitor, the one no one has touched in months. It sits on his shelf, dusty, long forgotten. Late at night, just as Stewie is about to fall asleep, the monitor suddenly turns on by itself. A weak, trembling voice comes through. "Stewie, can you hear me?" Stewie jumps up and grabs the monitor. "Who is this?" The voice is faint, muffled, as if speaking from far away, or from somewhere below the house. "Everything will change soon. I came early to warn you." The next morning, Stewie tries to tell Lois and Peter that someone is speaking to him through the baby monitor. They laugh it off. Peter says it's probably some neighbor messing around, and Lois insists it's just interference. Stewie tries to explain that it didn't sound like interference at all, but they don't take him seriously. Night after night, the voice returns. "You're alone, Stewie. No one hears you but me." Each time it grows more confident, as if it understands the house better than anyone living in it. Stewie is scared, but he can't stop listening. He starts carrying the monitor around during the day, afraid he'll miss the next message. One evening, the voice says, "They think you're small. They don't listen to you, but everything is going to change soon. You must be ready." Stewie whispers, "Ready for what?" The voice answers slowly, "It's time for you to take control." Then the monitor goes silent for 2 whole days. Stewie becomes restless. He walks through the hallways, checks every room, listens to the walls. He's certain the voice is somewhere close, maybe even inside the house. On the 3rd night, the monitor turns on by itself again, but this time the voice sounds closer, clearer, as if it's standing right behind the door. "Stewie, it's time. You know what to do. You always knew." Stewie trembles but lifts the monitor to his ear. I'm not sure." The voice becomes firm. "You've already begun. Now continue." The lights in the house flicker. The sounds outside disappear. No cars, no wind, no footsteps. Just heavy silence pressing against the windows. Stewie stands in the middle of the living room, tiny and pale, and for a moment it feels like the whole house is watching him. The screen cuts abruptly. A final scene plays like a post-ending shot. It's morning. The living room is empty. Stewie sits alone on the floor, motionless, staring straight ahead. In his hands, the baby monitor, broken clean in half. Wires exposed, batteries missing, plastic cracked. But Stewie still holds it to his ear, as if he's listening to something only he can hear. It all started so quietly that Peter didn't even notice anything was wrong at first. Brian just looked unwell, He spent more time lying on the couch, breathing slowly, blinking heavily, like he had some kind of cold he wasn't talking about. His voice was weaker. Lois brought him food. Chris covered him with a blanket. Stewie even joked that Brian was finally acting like an elderly dog. But Peter noticed something odd. Every night, at around the same time, Brian disappeared for a couple of hours. Peter heard slow, dragging footsteps in the hallway, almost like Brian was pacing half asleep. But whenever Peter got up to look, the hallway was empty. On the third day, everything changed. Brian suddenly said he felt amazing. Too amazing. He walked around the house with strange, unnatural energy, humming softly, cleaning things, complimenting everyone for tiny things. "You look wonderful today, Lois." "Meg, you're doing great." "Peter, I really appreciate you." His voice was too gentle, too even, and the way he smiled, his eyes stayed a little too wide. The family loved this new Brian. But Peter felt something wrong beneath it. One night, Peter woke up and saw Brian standing at the end of the hallway, staring at the wall, completely motionless. What are you doing?" Peter asked. Brian twitched slightly, like he had forgotten anyone else existed, and said, "Just thinking." But his mouth didn't move correctly when he said it. The next day, the first truly frightening thing happened. Brian stretched and yawned, and for a split second, Peter saw long, sharp fangs inside his mouth, far bigger than a dog should ever have. But Brian snapped his mouth shut instantly. "Peter, you're exhausted," he said softly. "You imagined it." That night, Brian's breathing became deep and low, like someone inhaling through a cavern. The fur around his neck began rising on its own, forming a strange, ragged mane. The house began to sound different. The walls seemed to vibrate slightly, and in the morning, Peter noticed Lois was gone. Her room was untouched, bed perfectly made, everything neat, but she was nowhere. Meg didn't answer. Chris didn't come to breakfast. All their rooms were empty, too clean, too silent. Only Brian remained. He sat by the window, back perfectly straight, staring outside. "Where is everyone?" Peter demanded. Brian didn't turn around. "They're fine," he said. "I told them to rest." His voice was warm, too warm, which only made it worse. The next evening, Peter returned home after work and felt a wave of cold air hit him as he stepped inside. The house was dark, quiet. Not cartoon quiet, real quiet, heavy and suffocating. "Lois? Kids?" No reply, just slow, heavy breathing coming from the living room. Peter flicked on the light. Brian was standing in the center of the room, standing, not sitting, and he looked wrong. He had grown, taller, broader, heavier. The fur along his back and neck stood up like jagged spikes. His shadow stretched across the entire wall, moving with each breath as if it had its own pulse. His eyes shone with a glassy, reflective glow. "Brian, buddy, what's happening?" Peter whispered. Brian turned his head, but far too much, far too easily, at an angle no dog's neck should make. "Peter," he said softly, "you shouldn't have come back." Peter backed toward the door, gripping a chair with shaking hands. "Where is my family? Where are they?" Brian took one slow, heavy step. The floor groaned under his weight. "They're resting," he repeated. "I told them I'd take care of everything now." Peter grabbed a lamp like a weapon. "You're not Brian," he whispered. Brian smiled, a smile too wide, stretching a little too far. "I'm better," he said, and lunged. The lights flickered, the frame shook, and Peter's scream was swallowed by a deep, monstrous roar that made the whole room tremble. When the lights came back, the living room was empty, completely empty. Only one figure remained. Brian, or whatever he had become, sat calmly on the couch, breathing slowly, staring straight ahead. The house was silent around him.